So we are so grateful to have Dani from And Her Saints on the podcast today. We are very excited to speak with you all about queer Catholic art as a conduit for liberation and visibility. As we get started with this conversation, Dani, would you mind sharing more about your journey?
Well, hello, I'm Dani. I'm from Costa Rica. I'm a femme lesbian. I'm an artist. I write sometimes, and my journey regarding anti saints as a concept started on Tumblr. I started basically like a blog to document my reversion story to the faith, because I although I grew up cradle Catholic, I spent the majority of my teen years as a staunch atheist, a militant atheist, as you call it. So I guess I found Tumblr to be my safe space to explore Catholicism from a queer affirming lens and not have that fear of rejection that I had experienced throughout my adolescence that led me to those places.
I love it. I love it. Also, appreciate a Tumblr shout out always.
I
Yes.
love Tumblr. It's a great place.
I know you mentioned this a little bit earlier. What did it look like to be raised in the church as a queer Catholic person? I know you mentioned that it was a shift more to atheism. What did the before and the after look like for you?
Yeah. Basically, although I am a cradle Catholic, my Catholicism was always very just assumed. Like I come from a Catholic family in Central America. Like it's just part of the culture. And I grew up around a lot of evangelicals, and there I kind of felt the shift of my family versus their families here in Costa Rica. And then eventually I found myself in an environment, in an Opus Dei environment, at an all girls school. And that really left a mark in me and in my faith in a very negative sense. It was very conservative, very far right, very just aligned with a lot of things that I don't stand with. I've never been that type of person. And that really strayed me away from God to the point where I engaged in a lot of militant atheism and just like being on Reddit and watching like listening to podcasts that were very anti religion and anti like theistic, not even like atheistic, where you just kind of like vibe and you're like, that's not for me. I was anti-theist. Like I thought religion was an evil to all humanity because of how much it impacted me, in the sense that I was being told pretty much every day that I was a mistake, that I was intrinsically disordered. If I were to be an active gay or whatever that means, would be full of like sickness and death and drugs and addiction and despair. And eventually I would pass away with a lot of regret in my heart from the queer experience. Yeah, so it was never a good relationship up until I left that environment. And my family was always very accepting. Like it was just that place that put me in that mental place.
No, I think what you're saying is incredibly important because we've spoken to previously on the podcast members and people who have been inherently have been closely knit into Opus Dei communities, and I think there's this idea of preying and exploiting people that are in a sense vulnerable spiritually, but also in terms of age and experience wise. And I think what you're speaking to is a lot of Opus Dei targeting young queer and trans children that are just trying to exist in the space of this church, just trying to exist in school that makes it difficult.
Absolutely. And I was never wealthy enough or spiritual enough to be considered for a kind of like more like Opus Dei centric place. I would say like I never got that push towards, perhaps at the beginning, but I didn't do my confirmation until I was in college. So it was not, I was kind of like just receiving the leftovers of the conversation, which I thought it was worse because the conversations were happening around me, about me, but not to me. And of course I wasn't out. Like it would be a danger to be out in those environments. They have protocols on how to proceed with a student that is out. And so for my own protection, even though I came to the school already knowing I was queer, I never would I would hide it. I would go so far into the closet just to protect myself as a measure of security. And yes, I guess although I was never fully like, I feel like there is a sort of like story with Opus Dei where you are targeted, especially like kids. But my mom was a working woman. We were a middle class family. I was never the goal. I was not elite enough, I guess, to be targeted.
I would love to know then how, from that place where you were not just rejecting God, I guess, but like militantly anti-God, how did you then kind of move to the faith position that you are now? Like, how did that transition happen for you?
I guess it was very slow and very hard to pinpoint. I started being more tolerant towards certain beliefs because I was always just anti-Catholic, because those were the people. A bit anti-evangelical too. I had also had bad experiences with evangelicals throughout my childhood, but my main focus was anti-Catholic, just from how much hurt it had caused me in very integral moments of my growing up. And I guess like I started very slowly coming to terms with it. I also have always, like I said, I've always been very spiritual. As a kid, I read the Bible maybe like 3 times, like the little Bibles for kids. I would just read it for fun. And I remember I saved up my money for this like book fair, because what I wanted, it was like a book fair that lasted like a week, and I would just get money from different family members and kind of do like, if I do the dishes tonight, do I get like 1,000 colones more, please? Just so I could get to the point where I could purchase this like illustrated like Bible that was like not illustrated Bible, but that you could illustrate. It was like a draw your own Bible thing. And I just saved up my money so I could buy it, and I still have it. And it's like I was so obsessed with the idea of God and the concept of a loving God and a merciful God. It was always something I really resonated with, and that really brought me a lot of comfort. And it wasn't until that comfort was taken away that I started deconstructing the I guess the implications of what believing in God and being a Christian was like. I got to a point where I didn't want to be associated with any of that, and where that just brought so much pain. I was like, okay, if God doesn't love me, then I'm not going to love God. And if God doesn't want anything to do with me, I don't want anything to do with God. And I remember God is Grey was a very big podcast at the time. I think she's no longer active on social media, but she was huge to me. And it helped that she was evangelical, because a lot of what she was saying was something that I recognized, but it wasn't my experience. And so I started toying with the idea of some Protestant. I was like, maybe the Catholics are the problem, and maybe I can find something else. Maybe I'd be a Quaker. I think that sounds fun. And so, but the fact that I'm in Costa Rica kind of like hinders a lot of that. There's not a lot of like church options. I wanted to be Episcopal. We didn't have Episcopal churches. But then as I started researching, I started realizing that I actually, what a bummer. I actually do believe in apostolic like succession. What a bummer. Actually, the Catholic theology on the Eucharist is the one I agree with most. What a bummer. Actually, I do believe in all the Marian dogma. So what now? I guess I am a Catholic. Like, I can't shake that away. I agree with it. With the very core tenets of like theology and like doctrine, outside of all the gay stuff and the abortion and the topics that I was really passionate about, everything else just fit into place. And then I found other queer Catholics and I was like, okay, so I'm not alone. So I'm not going crazy. And from there, I just, I started going through my confirmation process, and that it also hit during COVID. So I ended up being really kind of like sheltered, which was good because I had come from a place where I was like, nothing anyone will ever say will change how I feel about me. I am 15 and I know who I am. I know I'm a lesbian and that's okay. And then I went through the worst homophobia ever, and I realized that wasn't true. I was actually very soft, and it really did matter what others thought about me. Because it was COVID, like full on, like the hardest lockdowns, the start of the COVID pandemic, I was able to all my confirmation classes were online, so I just didn't have to be there. I didn't have to be experiencing. And it wasn't that bad. It wasn't great, but it wasn't that bad. And I was able to do it from a safe place, and kind of throughout the years, also having a social media platform just kind of like toughens up your skin. and now I feel like I'm at a place where I am very confident in who I am, and in being a queer Catholic, and making space for me and people like me in the church.
Well, and I know that you make that real for many people through the art that you create and creating visibility and representation.
Yes.
When did you first begin creating art, and what led to this creation of And Her Saints?
Okay, so because I was an arts kid in school, in this famous school that I'm mentioning, I was put in the position where I was forced to do a lot of sacred art, and I didn't like it. All the Corpus Christi, like rugs. And you will make the rugs, and then as you do the procession of Corpus Christi, of the Eucharistic procession, you will destroy the rugs. And it's kind of like that Buddhist thing where you have to like detach from the things you do and give it up, in this Catholic sense, give it up to God, and sacrificing your art and sacrificing everything, and spending hours and breaking your back, in order to make these rugs that are going to be destroyed by the people. Yeah. So I had to do that. It was more out of love for my arts teacher than anything. I hated that celebration with my whole heart, and it always left me just completely exhausted, because I was not only like illustrating it and spending months like sketching it, sizing it to real size, and then drawing it maybe like 5 different times, because first you do it in graphite pencil, and then you do it in color pencils, and then finally you do it in permanent marker, and then you have to fill it up with the sawdust. Exhausting. And then taking into account that I also have always had like some chronic illness, chronic pains, it was never good for me. And it was I was always assigned the Pope Francis rug, which I think it did help me, actually. It helped me to love him. At the beginning I didn't, and I hated being assigned the Pope Francis rugs, especially because you can't dye or bleach sawdust into being white. So we would have to go get the salt, and that meant I had to get at 5 a.m. because I was the one that needed the salt, and nobody could take the salt from me. So I had to show up at 5 a.m. at the school so I could run and get all the salt for the priestly robes, because Pope Francis decided not to wear red, just to spite me, I guess. And
just
then
you personally, Dani.
just me personally. Yeah. And that I always hated. I also made some art, like they would be like, for Mother's Day you have to draw this, and it was assigned like a religious theme. You'd have to draw for Christmas, you have to draw this, and it was an assigned religious theme again. So I always had a very negative relationship with religious drawing because it was always assigned to me. And then I graduated, and I no longer had that. Nobody was telling me to draw Jesus. Nobody was telling me to draw the Pope. And I kind of missed it. I was like, actually, I had fun doing it. Like, even though I hated it, it was always something that I liked being able to depict Jesus as a brown man, as a brown Palestinian man. And so when I started reverting, I started toying with it, and I had this little notebook, and then I would just sit down and I would draw what I wanted to draw. I would sketch. And I started with St. Michael, and I started with St. Thérèse, who quickly became my fave. And then I drew Jesus, and then my aunt got me an iPad because she didn't come to my graduation dance because there was such a Jan concert. And so she bought me that, and I started drawing with it, and quickly I grew. I started loving digital art because what I don't like about art is a mess. I like the quickness of digital art where I can just do it anywhere and I don't have to worry about staining my dress or staining my hands or having to clean up or having access to water.
And on that line as well, I think what I'm most excited to discuss with you is that one thing that I've discovered over the past several months, looking into queer Catholic art, and over the past several years exploring the hagiographies of trans and queer saints, has been the idea that many queer Catholic people inside the church found acceptance, or at least survival, through patronage of the arts. And in that space found and expressed themselves through art, including art that's homoerotic, sapphic, ephebic. So how is queer Catholic art for you a pathway to acceptance and liberation?
Yes. Just yes. That's my answer. I guess it's okay. So if we go back to the very beginning of the church, if you were a medieval peasant, you could not read. The way you interacted with the divine was through art. You would go to the cathedrals and you would see the paintings of the saints. And although you did not read Latin, or you could not read the inscriptions, that's how you learned. Because art is a very human thing. Art is a human thing. It's the basis of humanity, in my opinion. Because I did study art history. I did drop out, but I did have the career.
And you're not biased whatsoever, Dani. Not biased whatsoever.
Never. But art is integral to our understanding of humanity. I do feel that art is what I can do. Maybe I can't sit down and armchair dialogue with a theologian about why I'm not sinful. But with art, it's just a statement, and I'm saying it. And it's not a statement that will enter a dialogue, because you can't dialogue with a painting because it's done. It's done. What you see is what you have. And I think that's very important, not to open a dialogue, but to just say it as a statement and leave it as it is. I have dignity. I am loved. I am a reflection of God just as much as you are. You can either take it or leave it. And yeah, I think that's why art especially resonates with me, even more so than writing, because with writing you can dialogue, I feel, because there is an exchange. But art very rarely will beg of you to then, okay, so I'm going to respond to you, and then I get a response back, and then I'm going to respond to you again, and there's no back and forth. It's just there. It's done.
I think that resonates with me because I can think of many times when it's like you can have a relationship with a piece of art where you can sit and behold it, look at it, receive what it has to give you. But I take your point. It's not, you can't really have an argument with art. It is there. You could be angry about it, but it's not the same thing as arguing about some armchair philosophy with a Theo bro, one of those Theo bros.
Yeah. One of those Theo bros. Derogatory.
Yes, exactly. Derogatory.
Dani wants to specify.
Exactly.
Max, I wanted to say I loved how you put that, and you as well, Dani. I think it reflects this idea that very much the art that you depict, and I want to highlight, Dani, that you've depicted the love between Perpetua and Felicity. You've depicted the love between Hildegard of Bingen and Ricardus. This existence of, for me especially, like lesbian queer love within the church. And what you talk about is that queer love, just like the art you are creating, is a statement. It's not a question. Just as queer people is not a question for people to answer or to ask. We just exist, and that's enough. So, who are your favorite queer Catholic saints, and which artworks are your favorite?
Absolutely. Okay, so top three queers. I'm kidding. I would say probably Saint Joan of Arc and Saint Therese. I'm gonna hold them together just because I feel like you can't understand Saint Therese's queerness without Saint Joan of Arc's. So Saint Joan of Arc, I the other day I came up across like an Instagram infographic, the top way to argue theology nowadays, I guess. And it was very angry about the fact that people were queering Joan of Arc, and it was really funny, and it was calling out Chapel Roan's performance.
Mm-hmm.
Or yeah, I was like, whoa. I feel like for those arguments to be, you can't queer a historical figure, like, okay, I'm not even queering, like I'm highlighting things of her life story that resonate with me. And if you are not, I'm kind of like more on the argument, if you're not queering it, then you're straighting it, which I don't think it's a I think even if I do understand the valid argument of they just were. But you could. It's fun to have the discussions. I'm gonna have the discussions on that basis because it's fun. Joan of Arc. I love her. I think just her relationship with femininity is really interesting, and with her relationship with masculinity as well, and kind of that outright rejection of the male voices in the church telling her what to do, because she had that direct relationship with God that would lead her. And yeah, I think just her as a figure, it's lovely. And then I love Saint Therese because she also had a very deep connection with Saint Joan of Arc, and cosplaying as her for a play. I would say that's my favorite. That's one of my favorite art depictions. Just that photo, I would consider that art. And I also want it framed. Now that I think about it, of Saint Therese dressed as Saint Joan. I think Saint Therese is so often seen as this like petite, like she's so dainty, she's like a flower, she's so pure, she's so lovely. She is kind of like, I guess, I don't want to say that word. Let me think of a synonym. She is so often infantilized, and yes, she did die young, but she suffered a lot. she was ill. She had so much chronic pains. She was just suffering left and right. Went through immense amount of grief, and just so much pain. And she is of the child Jesus, but she's also of the Holy Face. There is an amount of darkness that you have to associate with Saint Therese, and also her calls to her feeling in her heart that her vocation was to be a priest, and that not being available to her, and having to do her own sort of like penance and sacrifice by being like, hey, I can't be a priest, but at least I'll be a nun. And even that is just like something has to do with masculinity and femininity, something. I guess that would be one, because I said I would group them together. I just love Saint Sebastian. I think I think Saint Sebastian is just, I do appreciate, hey, I'm not a gay man, I'm not a trans man, but I do appreciate what that man has done for a lot of men in the queer community and trans masc individuals.
Yeah.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks. And then I guess I would say, okay, and from him, can I say my own art? I do like the trans mask Saint Sebastian that I did. I think I did eat with that one.
Go for it. Highlight it.
Yeah.
Tell us.
Yeah, I liked it. It was fun. It was fun to do, and I was thinking about it for such a long time, and even got to a point where I was struggling so much with the pose that I asked one of my gay man friends that's also a dancer to be like, can you pose for me? Can you pose for? I can't do this. I can't figure out the hip placement. Help. Yes. So it was fun. It was fun. It was a fun creation. I did not end up modeling Saint Sebastian. I will say Paolo. I'm so sorry. Did not end up working. Maybe in the future. But yeah, I would say I do love Saint Sebastian. I love Saint Felicity and Perpetua, of course. Saint Felicity and Saint Perpetua. I do love the idea of their kiss of peace being reflective of the holiness of, lesbian relationships. I do love them. They're great.
Yeah.
I do have to remake them. The painting I did of them is very old, and I need to do it with my current skills, because sometimes I see it, I'm like, I would do that hand totally different. That hand is hideous. Yeah, and then finally, the one that I think is the funniest is Saint Catherine of Siena, and we had this conversation because she was so homophobic, and that is so funny to me because we were talking about the silliness of it. I love being silly. Let's have fun. Let's say these saints are gay icons. Also, Saint Catherine of Siena was very homophobic because, according to her, gay sex and sexual acts that were not straight and blessed by the church and whatever were so horrific that the demons that incited them, because of course, like a demon would have to incite such a sin, would flee once the act had begun because it was so horrific. Even the demons couldn't see it. And then she went on, like before she became she thought that being seen by men and having her be attractive to men was so horrific that she cut her hair to a little lesbian buzz cut and refused to marry and became a nun, which, hey, not all nuns are lesbian. However, I do think no straight woman would think about gay acts so much to develop some sort of canon of what happens when gay people have gay sex.
Well, and it's interesting.
To say she's a homophobic lesbian.
It was interesting too what you're saying about Joan of Arc and how people don't like it if you talk about Joan of Arc in a like in a queer way, like in a expansive way, like the idea that, oh, you're putting labels on her, right? But they kind of use the same arguments to us today, and they say, well, you're not allowed to say the word gay. When I came out as transgender to my parents, it was over a video chat, actually, and on my end I was with my therapist because I was like, I need backup. I need a friend here for this, and I said what I was gonna say, and then my mom's first reaction was, transgender is a political word. Like, that was her whole response, as if like saying that would take away from my identity or something like that. And I bring that up because I think it's a common theme, because like with the gay community, it's often, well, don't say the word gay, but you can say same-sex attraction. there's all these, the co-opting and the taking away of the language doesn't mean that queer people are suddenly not queer anymore. Like, we have always been here, and we've been here throughout history. And I personally think too that being able to look to and take inspiration or comfort in different saints and different characters, I think that's like, we're allowed to have this one. Like,
Yes.
we should be able
Absolutely.
to connect to people too, because even if they didn't use the same words, or even if the labels don't really work the same, it's still important that we have people to look up to and connect to.
Yeah. I also think it's very disingenuous to then, I don't know, I guess it's okay when they assign political languages, like when they, for instance, when Saint Perpetua and Saint Felicity, same case, are then patron saints of the pro-life movement. It's like, you're that didn't exist either back then.
That's true.
As a political thing. What are you saying? How are they okay? So it's okay when you do it, and it's okay when you assign your political ideas to it.
Yeah.
I don't understand that, but it's okay.
It's similar to, it's honestly similar. We're recording this in June. It's similar to the whole thing of like, oh, it's not Pride Month, it's the Sacred Heart Month. And it's like, first of all, it could be both. Like, there's, I don't see any, yes, I don't see a conflict here. But also, yeah, that's exactly to your point, where it's like, it's okay when we do it, when we colonize with our language and we police you, but as soon as you want to be your own person, then we have a problem.
How dare you?
Seems like that probably ties into your experience with Opus Dei, which seems like it's a very rigid, we have very firm ideas about what you're going to do. You were the art kid, so you're going to make the rugs every single time. Like, that's your job, that's your role, we know you're going to do that, and that's all you have to contribute, which is just not respectful of like the full complexity of you.
Yeah, and it was always I think that is the crux of it. It's you are only allowed to identify with what we push on you. If you cannot identify with anything that you choose yourself, only these presets that we have determined.
Yeah.
Very recently too. Like, it's very recent. They're acting as if the whole idea of even gender is this thing that has always existed. Or this thing about like marriage as a sacrament is something that has always existed, when that's not the case. That's really just not historical. It's not the case. And it's okay when we push these ideas onto you, but you can't push. It's not even that we're pushing it onto them, which is so, that I think that's the thing where it's like, you're just doing the same. It's like reverse. No, I'm just trying to live my life. I'm just trying to have dignity. I'm just trying to not want to die. You're the one that's just obsessed with me, which I get it. I would be obsessed with me too. Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Because there's a clear power dynamic, because the LGBTQ community is smaller. So like, there's the rest of society, there's like, it's the dominant culture. But I mean, then again, we have to go back to Jesus and say, where was Jesus? He was always with the people on the margins. He was always with the people that were rejected or pushed out or not seen as holy or being judged.
I think you're totally right. And Max and Dani, you could not have said it better of, I think, talking about this. And I love, as you mentioned, Dani, this idea that, and Max, you mentioned this as well, that there's a lot of pushback around Joan of Arc as a queer saint. And I think it's the idea you said, Dani, that heteronormativity will always be our default, especially not only in art history, but in church construction of saint lives. It's always going to be that this saint was straight and cis, instead of it being the default that they were gay and trans, or queer and trans, or bi and trans. And what you point out that I think is really interesting is the rich history of art that explores spiritual intimacy through bodily intimacy. So thinking
Yeah.
through that, like a lot of art is incredibly sexually charged. A lot of art
Yes.
explores gender like complexly throughout the history of the church. This is not a new construction.
Even the main artists who did some of the biggest main things, like Sistine Chapel alert.
I've always said that if all the gay Catholics left the church would be left with no art.
Seriously.
From the priestly
And no
robes
music.
to the choirs. Exactly, to the choirs. Like, they are all led by queer people. Genuinely. I'm kidding. There's no one straight choir. Have you ever met a straight theater kid? Didn't think so. No, genuinely. The art, the artists. I know firsthand that a lot of artists in the church, from the choirs and the plastic painters, the makers, and again, the priestly robes, those are all led by very queer individuals. All art is made by gay people, and the streets are mad about it. Be mad that you can't make good art.
I love this plausible deniability. Like a lawyer will call you up and be like, I'm sorry, you can't use absolutes.
Yes, exactly.
It's so interesting because, like, I'm thinking about with the silencing of not being able to use the language about the LGBTQ community, and then, you know, we have to direct some of our creativity somewhere. So we direct it into these things like art, like music, like the vestments. The famous tailor that did papal vestments, I think it's for Benedict, Francis, and now Pope Leo, is known to be a gay man. So he's a very famous character in all of this. But I'm just thinking about how it's like, it's something that I felt before I transitioned and stepped into an affirming queer theology. I worked in conservative Catholic video production, and I had this feeling all the time that they wanted to, like, take from the queer creativity. They wanted to take some of the styles or some of these things, and then, remove, like, the actual individuality or the actual heart or the message of that was coming from queer people, and then just use, like, the visuals or use some of the aspects. And it's just so frustrating because it's like, they want to simultaneously say you have no culture, you have no language to describe yourself, but we're going to take all the language and all the things that you do and all the things that you produce for ourselves.
Yes, exactly. They do like to exploit us a lot, without, just like relying on our labor, on our creativity, on our God-given creativity and talents.
Literally.
And just expect us to be silent, and just expect us to just work and be obedient. And I've always said that I know so many other gay artists, and I would be a million times more successful if I just shut up. But I love being annoying. I know it. I just know it. I know that I would get better gigs if I wasn't so loud and obnoxious about my gayness. I do think it's important. But yeah, they do they like the archetype of the good gay, of the good queer Catholic.
Respectability politics.
And also all of this to uphold something that is also still so rigid, upholding patriarchy, upholding a system where everybody has to listen to celibate, almost said celibate gay men. Celibate men.
I mean, our Pope has made that flip up twice.
But that's kind of my point, is like, it's like, I just feel that most straight people are not fully realizing how much these rigid rules, rigid roles are also hurting them. Like, they're not having the space to freely express who they are either, because the truth is, like, there's a not insignificant number of straight people who do not fit straight stereotypes. I know plenty of straight women who are like very passionate about work. They're very passionate about their jobs. They love their children and they like being mothers, but they're also like, they want to go out there and do things. They have ambitions and passions. And I know plenty of men who are either directly like a stay-at-home parent or are just deeply invested and passionate about their family and kind of just don't really just go to work because we all have to live in capitalism. But it's not like this noble, passionate thing. It's like, I would rather like invest in my family and the things that are really important to me. And I don't know. I just feel like that's another really important aspect is it's like, this isn't serving actually anybody. So why do we put so much effort into upholding it when there's so much more freedom in the queer community? And that's something that is just so beautiful to witness.
We've talked about it on the masculinity series, especially thinking through just how toxic not only like machismo is, but also Marianismo within these cultures of kind of essentializing what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a man. But I think what you spoke about, both of you, was this idea that so much, even that what like cis straight people are contributing to the church and what they are getting from the church is the product of queer people, but they expect that silence in return. And I think it's kind of that coloniality of gender and sexuality of, we expect your visibility of your creative labor and outputs, but we expect you to live on those walls, to stay on the Sistine Chapel ceiling. We don't want to see you. We don't want to see your presence. We don't want to hear your voices. Just exist and be seen and not heard.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I think that's why being annoying is so important.
I
remember saying the thing about, sorry, Emma, what did you say?
No, I was just going to say, I love that you're annoying. Being silly, being a pointedly queer Catholic artist who claims that identity and claims that that's part of what they create is essential.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's part of the package. Like, I'm not gonna compartmentalize myself and be like, okay, so here's my queer art, and then in my secret life, which fine if you do it, that's so fine. That's just, I'm not doing that. Like, I already spent my entire life doing that. I'm not doing that. It's part of the package. Like, I can't separate it. It's just me. And like I was saying about the silliness, like I do think there is something important to be said, kind of like affronting. Like, for instance, I get a lot of hate through my Etsy store. You know, a lot of people report me and send me like customer requests, customer messages that are just like, you're a heretic, die, you know. And and what I did a few months ago, my Etsy store is dying this July 1st. It's gonna die. Etsy's shutting me down, just like at a like regional thing. It's fine. I'm not full of rage. It's so fine. They are shutting me down, so that's not gonna happen anymore, probably. But for a long time, that was like a daily routine of just waking up and getting these messages. Which, by the way, getting into the details, of Etsy is that you cannot leave a message from a potential customer unanswered for more than 24 hours. So you have to get back to them ASAP.
Oh my
or
gosh.
else you don't get a badge of like star seller and stuff. Like, you basically get
infuriating.
Yes. And so there was no option of like reporting the messages. Like, there is maybe like a spam option, but that's not really like, I can't just write to Etsy and be like, this is not a customer. And so I would get penalized, and there would be months where I wouldn't be able to get the star badged, which I love my badges. And eventually, like, I turned that into silliness by just making it a shirt, my very infamous shirt. That's I got called a heretic. So it's something like, I got called a heretic, and all I got was this lousy T-shirt.
Yeah.
And then I used it to raise funds for a Catholic trans woman's reassignment surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Dani,
surgery.
I love this. specifically because what you talk about, this silliness, it reminds me of, and I know we've talked about this, like in with this latest election of the new pope, there's been a lot online of kind of leaning into not only the silliness but also the incredibly queer nature of Catholicism, of Catholic art, of the conclave, of the pageantry. And what you're talking about reminds me Pope Crave, that was like that ended up from like this teeny tiny little account on X of like posting all of these queer like funny moments and memes, like ended up like there on the day that they elected
At the
Pope Leo
Vatican.
at the
Yes.
Vatican. And what they did is producing a zine that like raised money for intersex rights because it was about and reflecting on the Conclave movie, where that was the main arc. So what I think you're doing is so incredibly important, and it's resonating. It's people are doing this collectively, and silliness is getting people places.
Yeah,
Accepting that there is nuance and grayness and difference is really
exactly.
bringing people to the end.
The silliness is a direct response to kind of like this like apologetics culture, which I think I think it's very important for people in like the initial stages of like, I'm queer, am I sinful? Like you do need that response that's like, no, you're not. But you can't stay in that, I guess, like step of no, I'm not sinful. Like no, like what I do is not a sin. Like who I am is not a sin. Like I it gets a bit boring and it gets a little bit too obsessed with apologetics. And I hate Christianity that's just all apologetics and trying to convert people and proselytizing. I think that's so boring. It's so boring. So I think the silliness is that response of actually there is no argument. There is no apologetics to be had here. I am who I am, and I am gonna have fun about it and love God about it. And if you're mad about it, that's fine. But yeah, I'm just going to exist. And I do not have to have an argument or a theological debate about what I deserve dignity because I just do.
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of your same philosophy with a painting and a piece of art is just a statement. And it's not
Yeah.
an argument. It's not apologetics. It just is.
Yes. I feel like this is so chronically online for me to say, but we are obsessed with the discourse. And sometimes there should be no discourse. You owe me dignity, and that is a fact because I am a child of God.
Yeah.
And there is nothing you can conjure up that is, but actually nothing that is going to negate that fact. Nothing.
I was just going to say, as we kind of come to the end of our time here,
Crazy.
you may know about our Queer Catholic Joy series that we're doing.
I
And
know about that one.
we think that that's like a
I'm
super
a big
important
fan.
thing. Thank you. We think that's a super important thing to do because, yes, there are bad things happening. And yes, a lot of bad things do happen to queer people. But especially in light of us becoming kind of the bad things become fetishized. And it's always like, oh, you know, some new Vatican document came out. And now, Max, tell us about how upsetting this was. And I'm like, that's not what I want to be doing. But in light of all of that, Queer Catholic Joy and the celebrating of that is important to us. So we wanted to put it to you. What are some ways that you experience Queer Catholic Joy, or just some stories or anything that comes up for that?
Yes, of course. I would say like the first thing that came into my mind immediately, just going to mass with my girlfriend. I love
100%.
going to mass with my girlfriend. That's fun. I like it. I like to just thank God that I exist and that she exists and that we exist together and that we share this thing.
Yeah.
And even if it looks a little bit different for each of us, I think it's very beautiful, and it's a thing that brought us together, and it just feels so relieving to even go to mass with our families. Like genuinely, like it's all of us taking up a pew, and like just any other Catholic couple can do. And I know that's a big privilege that doesn't happen very often, but it is the thing that has I feel like healed the very last bruises on my soul Yeah, and it's important. I think it's so beautiful to just um have exist unapologetically in a place where you can love God and love your queerness and not have to excuse any of those aspects. So that's it, I would say.
That's a great answer.
For me, as someone who works in museums, as someone who loves and has really connected in faith through history and art, like my queer Catholic joy is your art. Is like seeing like I know is like it's real. It's like
Crazy, Emma. Don't say that. I'm kidding.
but
I love
it's
you.
true. No, but it's true. It's like my queer Catholic joy comes from like seeing images and representations of divinity that look like me. And that sometimes the art you create is like the first examples of that ever.
Yeah.
And I am so
That's
grateful.
crazy.
I'm so grateful that you get to do that work and also that I'm able
Yeah.
to see it and that I know you.
Thank you, Emma. I am very thankful for your friendship as well. Yours too, Max. I love you guys, and I do find myself very humbled, and I those sorts of messages, like whenever I get one where it's like I have found myself, like me back to God because of you, like I feel so deeply humbled because it's never something I tend to do. Like I genuinely, like I said, I don't like proselytizing. I will not tell anyone like you should convert to the Catholic Church. It's actually so fun here, because it's not. It sometimes is, but it's also not. And I think it's a very unique journey for each and every person. I'm nobody to be telling you what to do with your life, or what sacraments to take, or anything. I'm literally just a girl. I'm sorry. But it's always so humbling, and I do appreciate it a lot. And it feels terrifying, genuinely, because it feels like the most integral thing. But because for me, my relationship to God is everything to me. It is everything. Like it's at the core of everything I do. So for someone to be like, I think of you in this space, and I feel safe with the things you do in this space. Like that's crazy to me. That's crazy to me. And I am very grateful. I do try to kind of like not be so vulnerable, and by making little silly jokes. But I am very grateful, and thank you, Emma, and thank you, Max and Emma, for having me here. Nothing happened.
Dani, is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you think is important to bring up in this conversation in light of all these topics with art and queerness and Catholicism? Anything else you want to add?
Everyone should make art. Art is a form of prayer, and I think everyone should do it. Everyone should make art, and if you make something and you think I would like it, send it to me. I always like seeing that.
I agree with you about that it is very healing, and it's a way of taking up space too, like the painting or a piece of art. It's here, it exists, it's undeniable. This is my message. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think everyone should make art. Every single person, everyone should sit down and just pray about it. Draw something. And yeah, I think I think it was Makoto Fujimura. I think that's his name. Maybe making it up. Give me a sec. The guy that wrote Art and Faith. Fujimura. I think his name is Fujimura.
Yes, I just found it.
I am so smart. I literally have such a big brain full of facts and knowledge. Anyway,
You do.
He said, I think I really do love his book, and it really did make a lot of. I need to reread it because it's been years since I read it, but I think it's so important to realize that when God says we are made in His image, it also entails that we are made to create as well. Because as a creator creates, we create. because we are made in creator's image, we should create. And so make art. Also, in this day and age where AI is making slop and is taking all of the things that make us creation and in the image of God and is absolutely destroying that, we should all create. We should all be artists.
100%.
We should all make with our hands and our love and our hearts and our soul.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Dani. It was so lovely having you on the podcast. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thanks to you and this space that we have here to discuss these topics. We are so excited to share this with you all.